In this video, I'm going to name every NBA team's worst player ever. Now, let's be real. Every NBA team has had a lot of bad players, but usually the worst of the worst players don't last that long. So in order to remedy this, I had to put in a qualifier. Every player in this video played at least 100 games. So not only were they bad, they were also consistently getting actual important minutes, actively harming the team they played for. Without further ado, I hope you enjoy the video. Atlanta Hawks, John Koncak. Koncak was most famous for his massive contract that he got, giving him the nickname John Contract. He somehow managed to play 10 seasons for Atlanta, appearing in 717 regular season games. In that time, he averaged 4.6 points and 5 rebounds and 1 assist. Ironically enough, his best season might have been his rookie year when he averaged 8.3 points per game. He never averaged more than 6 points a game in any other year after that. If you're trying to argue that white privilege is real, just look at this guy's career. I'm kidding, or am I? Boston Celtics, Greg Kite. Kite played in 241 games for the Celtics, averaging a blistering 1.6 points per game on 41% shooting, this despite being a center. He also appeared in 53 playoff games, shooting 40% and averaging 1 point per game. The amazing thing is, Kite wasn't even that good in college either. In his 4 years at BYU, he averaged just 6.4 points per game on 45% shooting and 50% from the foul line. Is now a good time to mention that he has as many rings as Wilt and Hakeem Olajuwon. Brooklyn Nets, Yinka Dare. Yes, Yinka Dare's entire stat line is horrible. 2.1 points per game, below 40% shooting. But what separates Yinka from even other terrible players on this list is that the guy is the worst passer in NBA history. In his career, 3.5 years with the Nets, where he appeared in 110 games and played in over 1,000 minutes, he recorded just 4 assists. In '96, he played over 600 minutes and recorded 0 assists to 72 turnovers. In fact, he recorded 88 career turnovers before recording his first ever assist in 1997. It's unfathomable. He would finish his career with 4 assists to 96 turnovers. I mean, this is amazing. How is this not talked about more? How does a guy not accidentally stumble ass backwards into an assist on some basic pass? I mean, it's so horrific, it's impressive. Charlotte Hornets, Adam Morrison. If you're an NBA fan, you already know the skinny on Adam Morrison by now. The former Gonzaga superstar was famous for his porn stash and being tall and white and having the ability to shoot a little bit, which of course garnered him some Larry Bird comparisons because the media is lazy as shit. Morrison's tenure with the Bobcats lasted 122 games, where he shot 37% overall and just 34% from 3 despite being an alleged elite shooter. Terrible defense, a bunch of turnovers, no passing or rebounding. Basically everything he did was terrible. Oh yeah, and he was the 3rd overall pick. Great job, Michael Jordan. Chicago Bulls, Dickie Simpkins. It was tougher to find a player for the Bulls than I thought it would be. And ironically enough, the player who I ended up picking was a member of each of their last 3 championship teams as a bench warmer. He appeared in over 300 games for the Bulls, averaging 4.3 points, under 4 rebounds, with more turnovers than assists, on 44% shooting, this despite being power forward and a center. There may have been worse players to play for Chicago than Simpkins in a vacuum, but I can't remember a player that was as actively bad that lasted as long on the Bulls as Simpkins did. Also, he's got Dick and Simp in his name. Shout out to Adam22. Cleveland Cavaliers, Sagana Diop. Gosh, there were so many of LeBron's teammates from his first tenure in Cleveland that I could have chosen, but a lot of them didn't meet the 100 game threshold. Diop, on the other hand, did, appearing in 193 games for Cleveland. It's not a stretch to say that he might be the worst scorer in the history of the NBA. Despite being 7 foot tall, he shot just 36% from the field and averaged 1.6 points per game in his 4 years with Cleveland. The only thing this guy did well was block shot, which was a result of him being a gigantic human being. He wasn't even that great of a rebounder for his size. He somehow lasted 12 years in the league and even started every game for the Mavericks in the 2006 NBA Finals. Dallas Mavericks, Randy White. No, not the NFL Hall of Famer. This Randy White went to Louisiana Tech and played power forward. So guess what? He got a lot of Karl Malone comparisons. Mailman 2, Mail Kid, Karl McClone, Carl Jr., etc. The good news is that he is not Karl Malone off the court. The bad news is that he was nowhere near as good as Karl Malone on the court. The Mavericks picked him 8th overall in 1989, and he played all 5 of his NBA seasons in Dallas, appearing in 281 games, finishing with career averages of 7.4 points per game and 4.9 rebounds per game on 40% shooting. But at least he would redeem himself as a clutch playoff performer, appearing in 1 game in 1990, playing 2 minutes and recording 0 stats. Denver Nuggets, Nikola Skeetishvili. I talked about how terrible Skeeta was in one of my more recent videos, but I'm just going to remind you again. He lasted about 2.5 years in Denver, appearing in 143 games, averaging 3.2 points per game on 30% shooting, 24% three-point shooting, and basically terrible averages everywhere else. You're never going to guess this, but he was 7 foot tall. I remember reading somewhere once that the reason the Nuggets took Skeeta 5th overall was because he made 10 threes or so in a row during a workout. And you have to remember, this was just as Dirk Nowitzki was cementing himself as a superstar in the early 2000s, so every team was looking for the next Dirk. I highly doubt the Nuggets will ever draft a good player whose first name starts with the letters Nikol. Detroit Pistons, Eric Montross. Yet another tall, white, unathletic center makes this list. Montross played parts of 4 seasons with Detroit, appearing in 167 games. This despite averaging just 1.9 points per game and 2.8 rebounds, with no passing and really nothing else to show for it. Somehow he got worse in the playoffs with his small tenure in Detroit, averaging 1 point per game and 2.1 rebounds in 7 playoff appearances. One of the more overlooked and underrated draft busts of all time, to be honest. Golden State Warriors, Stephen Curry. Todd Fuller. Fuller was not only terrible, but he was also picked a couple spots ahead of Kobe Bryant in the 1996 NBA draft. He lasted just 2 years with the Warriors, appearing in 132 games, averaging 4 points and 3.4 rebounds per game on 42.5% shooting. But his ability to be tall and white at the same time was unmatched, and nobody can ever dispute that. Houston Rockets, Ryan Bowen. Hey look, it's a guy who wasn't a center. Bowen was a small forward, although he was white, for Houston for 2 years in 05 and 06, appearing in 134 games, averaging just 1.5 points per game on 36% shooting. He was known as a defender, but it's still kind of incredible how he got consistent minutes on a team with T-Mac and Yao, despite having absolutely zero offensive ability whatsoever. But God, he was such a scrappy gym rat, wasn't he? Los Angeles Lakers, Josh Powell. Look, considering how emotional Lakers fans are, and considering that they think every player who isn't a superstar sucks, this decision really won't make anybody happy, but somebody had to be chosen, so I picked Josh Powell. He played 2 years for the Lakers, ironically, in their repeat years in the late 2000s, despite doing absolutely nothing well. He appeared in 123 games, averaged 3.4 points per game on 41% shooting, while averaging more turnovers than assists. He appeared in 27 playoff games, shooting 41% from the field and averaging 1.4 points. Shout out to Skip Bayless. It's still not exactly clear what Powell did well, but he managed to get 2 rings out of it, so congrats to him, I guess. Indiana Pacers, Greg Drelling. Can you believe that a 7'1" scrawny white guy who sucks at basketball somehow lasted 7 seasons with the Pacers? Drelling played in 322 games for the Pacers, averaging 2.1 points and 2 rebounds a game, as well as more turnovers than assists. He also appeared in 8 and started 5 playoff games for the Pacers, averaging an astounding 2.1 points and 2.4 rebounds on 38% shooting. Something tells me that despite his complete ineptitude as a basketball player, he was a fan favorite in good old Indiana. Los Angeles Clippers, Michael Olowokandi. There have been a lot of terrible players to suit up for the Clippers, but I don't think any player has done more damage on the court to hinder the chances of the Clippers winning than Olowokandi. If Olowokandi had been a late first-round pick or a second-round pick as opposed to the first overall pick, there is absolutely zero way in hell he would have gotten as much opportunity as he did. He started 310 games for the Clippers in his 5-year stint there, never showing any sort of signs that he could become a good NBA player. The only thing that he was relatively decent at was blocking shots, which was a byproduct of him being 7 foot tall. Honestly, if you're over 7 feet tall and you don't shoot at least 45% from the field for your career, you should be arrested. Memphis Grizzlies, Dante Jones. Jones played 4 years for the Grizzlies, appearing in 221 games, averaging 5.1 points and basically nothing else. The Grizzlies did make the playoffs a couple of times during his 4 years, and it was basically the same story there as well. Besides defense and the occasional three-pointer, Jones really did nothing well. It's pretty incredible that he somehow lasted 16 years in the league, including winning a championship with the Cavaliers in 2016. Did you know the Warriors went 73-9 and then blew a 3-1 lead in the finals and then recruited Kevin Durant, all just to stop LeBron James? Incredible. incredible, right? Miami Heat, Norris Cole. Cole played 3.5 years for Miami, appearing in 274 games, and also won 2 championships. He stood out because, unlike LeBron, Wade, and Bosh, he was the gritty underdog that even the biggest Heat haters couldn't hate. Another reason they couldn't hate him was because he really wasn't that good enough to hate, averaging just 6.2 points a game on terrible efficiency, while also being a liability defensively because of his lack of size. Pause. At least, unlike a lot of other players on this list, he'll be fondly remembered by his team's fan base. Milwaukee Bucks, Paul McKeskey. Easily the sexiest player in NBA history, McKeskey played 6.5 seasons in Milwaukee, appearing in 438 games, averaging 3.7 points per game, 3.2 rebounds on 45% shooting. He also appeared in 63 playoff games, averaging 3.9 points per game in those games, a playoff riser. He also defeated Michael Jordan in the first round in 1985, so for all the JJ Barea jokes LeBron gets, MJ lost to this guy in the first round. That's even more embarrassing. It's really incredible how many teams in the 80s and 90s just rolled out tall white stiffs at the center position because it was the thing to do. Minnesota Timberwolves, Mark Madsen. Wow, another untalented white center. Hey, it's not my fault the stats are what they are. He lasted 6 seasons in Minnesota, playing in 270 games, averaging an incredible 1.8 points per game, but fear not, in his one playoff run with the Timberwolves, he averaged 2.8 points per game. Mad Dog, as he's known, will always be most famous for his quote-unquote dancing at the Lakers title parade back in the early 2000s. Let me just say there's absolutely zero chance this guy would play in today's NBA. The last of a dying breed. New Orleans Pelicans, Solomon Hill. This dirty piece of shit played 3 years in New Orleans, appearing in 136 games, starting 87 of them. And he averaged 5.8 points per game and 1.6 assists per game on 38% shooting, in between diving at players' ankles to ruin their season. God, I can't tell you how much I hate this bastard. What is he good at? What did he do? He did nothing well. And it wasn't like he was 7 foot or super tall or anything to justify lasting so long in the league. God, it just pisses me off. Hearing his name for me is like stepping in water with a sock on. Good riddance to this talentless, ankle-hunting cockmunch. New York Knicks, Travis Knight. I'm not going to say you already know what I'm thinking, and I already know what you're thinking. Knight somehow managed to be worse for the Knicks than Kevin Knox and Frank Ntilikina. He played 3 seasons in the Big Apple, appearing in 126 games, averaging 1.5 points per game on 33% shooting. But fear not, he stepped up his game in the playoffs. In his one career playoff game with the Knicks, he played 1 minute and committed 1 foul. That's what dominance looks like, folks. Oklahoma City Thunder, Bud Stallworth. The first real throwback in this video, Stallworth played just 2 years for Seattle, shot terrible, didn't average many assists, really did nothing well at all. Did you also know that the name Bud, quote unquote, is a slang term for marijuana, which is the deadliest drug on the planet? I bet you didn't, but now you do. Don't be like Bud Stallworth. Don't end up like Bud Stallworth, where you're a shitty NBA player and your first name is a nickname for the Devil's broccoli. Orlando Magic, Greg Kite. That's right, folks. Greg Kite was so dogshit, he's the worst player in the history of 2 NBA franchises. I don't know how he did it, but he somehow managed to trick the Orlando Magic into letting him play in 247 games, where he averaged 3 points a game and 5 rebounds per game. His numbers with Orlando were slightly better, more like slightly less shitty, but they were still terrible. Let's just say that from 1992 to 1993, the Magic upgraded big time at the starting center position, going from Kite to Shaquille O'Neal. Philadelphia 76ers, Jason Williams. Williams would later become a respectable NBA player with the Nets, but with the 76ers, he was complete dog shit. The famous limousine driver respecter played just 2 years in Philly after being a first-round pick and averaged 3.8 points per game on 40% shooting while being terrible at every other facet. He barely made the 100-game cutoff, and the fact that the Sixers gave up on him so quickly just lets you know how bad he really was. Although he did shoot 80% in 4 playoff games with Philly. Take that, MJ and LeBron. Phoenix Suns, Dragon Bender. It was really a battle between Bender, Josh Jackson, and Joe Klein for the worst player in Suns history, but I went with Bender because I'm still, as I've mentioned in previous videos, so pissed off that such an amazing badass name went to such a piece of dog shit. I mean, just look at his numbers with Phoenix. 5.3 points a game, 39% shooting, absolutely terrible. Couldn't pass, couldn't rebound, sucked at defense, somehow went 4th overall in 2016. He was so bad and so irrelevant that he doesn't even get talked about anymore. Portland Trailblazers, Mark Bryant. Bryant somehow played in 431 games over 7 seasons for Portland, despite never averaging more than 6 points a game in any season. He didn't really rebound rebound that well. He didn't pass. He wasn't a great shot blocker. All he was really good for was committing fouls. He's also one of the quote-unquote big men that MJ had to face in his 6 finals appearances. Congrats to MJ on defeating the mighty Mark Bryant in the 92 finals. Way more tough than Steph Curry and Kevin Durant, that's for sure. Sacramento Kings, Bobby Hurley. Another player who I just recently talked about in one of my recent videos. Hurley played 4.5 seasons with the Kings despite never being able to shoot the ball or defend or rebound or do anything besides being able to pass, which is expected out of a point guard. Even if he hadn't had a serious crash early in his rookie season, there's really no chance he would have become anything better than a poor man's Ricky Rubio at best, which is not what you want out of a top 7 pick in the draft. Hell, I don't even know if you want the real Ricky Rubio in the top 7 of a draft. San Antonio Spurs, Carlos Herrera. Carlos played 3 seasons in San Antonio, appearing in 177 games and starting 65 of them. He averages 4.8 points per game and 3 rebounds a game on 43% shooting. Like everybody else on this list, he did literally nothing well, and there's no explanation as to why he lasted so long besides being a very large human being. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that among the all-time power forward rankings for the Spurs, he's behind Tim Duncan. I know, it's incredibly brave of me to say that. Toronto Raptors, Rafael Araujo. Good old Haffy. I talked about him in my last video. Not only is he the biggest draft bust in the history of the Raptors, you're welcome, Bargnani. He is simply the worst player to ever put on a Raptors uniform that got an extended amount of chances. He appeared in 111 games across 2 seasons with the Raptors before they gave up on the 8th overall pick because, again, he was terrible at literally everything besides being a very, very large human being. People like my ex-wife say that size doesn't matter, but it's obvious that size does matter. And not necessarily in terms of length, but girth. There are some people who think that girth is more satisfying than length. At least that's what I've heard. Wait, am I still talking about basketball here? Utah Jazz, Greg Foster. Oh, look, another front court player that MJ got to play in the finals twice. Unbelievable. What are the odds? Foster played 4 years for the Jazz, appearing in 272 games, averaging 4.1 points, 2.7 rebounds, and nothing else of note except for his horrendous 43.6% field goal percentage. In the playoffs, it was not better. He appeared in 60 playoff games and averaged, well, you can see for yourself how terrible it was. Definitely way more difficult to beat this guy than Tim Duncan and Kawhi Leonard and Manu Ginobili and Tony Parker. And finally, Washington Wizards, Kevin Duckworth. Duckworth's best seasons came with the Blazers, again, another opponent of MJ's. Despite his decent raw stats, let's just say that the advanced stats do not paint a good picture of him. But you don't need advanced stats to tell that his 2 years in Washington weren't great. He averages 6.8 points per game and 5 rebounds a game on 43% shooting, providing no assists or defense and a lot of fouls. At least the Bullets changed their name to the Wizards to end gun violence in this country forever. Thank you so much, Washington.